We're going to start, if it's possible. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming for this panel discussion titled Corona. A little bit closer. Okay. Thank you very much. Is it good now? I'm comfortable. I guess I'm audible for the audience. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for participating and coming for this panel discussion titled Colonial Encounters at the Borderlands, Writing and Resistance. On July 2013, during an election campaign, Kevin Rudd, at the time Prime Minister of Australia, at a matter of voting date, instituted and introduced a new legislation in Australia, according to which they would no longer accept or process asylum claims of anybody who arrives by the way of sea with boats. While this legislation was passing, Behrouz and tens of other people were already en route to Australia in the middle of the sea. They arrived to the Christmas Island territory of Australia on 23rd of July 2013 on the occasion of Behrouz's 30th birthday, only 4 days after the passing of this new legislation. They were supposed to arrive on 16th of July, however, the boat got lost. So in the window of these 4 and 5 days, the legal status and the condition upon which they were going to be treated completely and dramatically changed. The only thing, and ever since 2013, Behrouz and thousands of other travelers been put in what Australian government would like to call offshore processing center, which truly and by the virtue of its condition is nothing short of a camp prison. Since 2013, for the last 6 years, they have been in these prisons. And the only thing that stands between us and the systematic use of starvation, thirst, imposition of insomnia, manipulation of bodies and manipulation of hope is accounts of resistance and resilience that comes from Monos. One of the most significant of such accounts is Behrouz Writing, who have been doing this anonymously for Guardian for a long time and later on under his own name. And this significant book, No Friend But Mountains, highly critically acclaimed, multiple prize-winning memoir of prison. Behrouz Boochani is joining us through video link, so we are using and dealing with technology, so I hope that you bear with us. There will be probably some lag in sound and picture. Behrouz, in preparation of this event, I was trying to figure out how to introduce Behrouz. Behrouz is often introduced as a journalist, an author, a poet, a filmmaker, and above all, the way that I understood it, he's a person of resilience and resistance who writes not for living, but for a living. We are joined in the panel with Dr. Hashem Ahmadzadeh. Hashem is teaching at Uppsala University as Institute of Philology and Linguistics. Hashem has written his PhD dissertation on nation and novel, a study of Persian and Kurdish narrative discourses. Hashem have prolifically published articles in relation to questions of writing, narrative, novels, and construction of identity and nation. Hashem has been teaching in Uppsala University, Stockholm University, Exeter University, and French Lebanese University in Lebanon. We are also joined by Rahel, Weldeab, Sebhatu. She is a Pan-Africanist post-colonial feminist. She is also a PhD student at Malmö University, starting soon, and board member of Afro-Svenskar Forum for Rättvisa. And my name is Amin Parsa. Thank you for coming here. I would like to start from you, Behrouz. I hope that you hear us properly. You've been asked a lot in this last couple of months about the process of writing your book, but I would like to start by first thanking you for joining us and also asking you about why did you decide to write this book? What is the significance of this book for you? And also tell us about your experience of being to deal with the Australian prison regime. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I would like to say hello to everyone. I think first I should explain something about my works. Often people know me through the book No Friend But the Mountains, but I think No Friend But the Mountains is only a part of my works. So I have been working as a journalist and activist for 6 years. So I publish, more than 100 articles as an opinion articles. I think I myself rely on those articles more than this book, and because for years and years I have been publishing those articles and engage people in Australia and internationally to this prison camp and to understand this exile policy, and also some kind of cinematic work, which the main one is the movie Choco Please Tell Us the Time. I think, we attended the Gothenburg Film Festival 2 years ago. So we had 4 screenings of the Choco Please Tell Us the Time in Sweden. So I think that you are aware of it or not. This book is only a part of, my works, and I think we should understand it in a political context. I have used literature as a weapon, as a tool to share this story and to challenge the power structure in Australia. So that's why we cannot just understand this book through literature and reduce it to only literature. It can be a political act and a political resistance. So that's why many people try to just understand this book and just think about this as only a particular work. But I think which is not true, because it doesn't help us to understand this prison system and this exile policy. Another thing I would like to mention is that, in the question you asked about why did I decide to write this book. So I think publish articles, but I think
بهروز صدات قطع میشه الان، اگه بتونیم.
language is a kind of language that is follow the power language, power structure language, is a part of the power structure language and created by the power and is related to the power and follows the propaganda by the government. For example, still they call this prison camp as a offshore processing center, which is not true, because this word created by the official, created by the government and cannot represent the circumstances. So that's why I renamed this place as a prison, because it is a place worse than a prison. Although I think that prison is not the right word. Prison, this place is so different with prison, and we can use some other concept like modern slavery or exile policy, this kind of words. So that's why, always I criticize journalism language. Some people tell me that for years and years we have been following the news about this exile policy, but by reading your book, we just understood that what is happening there and how this system works. So that's why I think that to prove that journalism language is not a language that we tell this story, we share this tragedy. So that's why I rely on artistic language. I rely on literature language, which is capable that I tell this story and help the readers to take them into the prison camp to live with the people and understand people and understand how is life inside the prison camp. So that's why, I decided to write this book in this language. Definitely, I could write a simple book 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but I think it was a good decision that I work on this to write a book to really challenge the system, to challenge the power structure. So, sorry, I forgot the second question.
I will come back to you with the second question again. I would like now to go to Hashem, and I forgot to mention that Hashem currently just finished the Kurdish translation of No Friends But Mountain, and is going to be published soon in Sweden with the Arzan publication, and in Suleiman in Kurdistan with Azal Navi's publication. Hashem, I want to ask you about the book. I have a lot of questions, probably I can put them in one. Both the genre of this book, it's somewhat a genre-bending practice of memoir, survival testimonial practices. We can put it with prison notebook literature, that there's massive amount of them, but also it is poetic and also a form of novel literature. So one question is that, what sort of genre and narrative practices is present, and what is the significance of these narrative practices in order to capture catastrophes of this magnitude? And talking about that is, and the other one I want to ask you about the location of this book in the larger identity production of a nationhood and people of Kurdistan, or for that matter, production of identity, both of the people in the book and also those readers.
Thank you. First of all, let me say good morning or good day to all the participants. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, especially having Behrouz behind me now. I see him well, despite the fact that I have been in contact with him during the last 7 months regularly. But it's the first time that I see his, nice messianic appearance, so nice. Thank you, Behrouz. Hello, very especially to you. And thanks to the organizers of this ceremony. Talking about Behrouz's book and its generic features is something that one can really discuss. What kind of book this book is? Is it a novel? Is it a memory? Is it an autobiography? Recently, it has been rewarded as a novel, as a national biography, and he himself explains in the book that he has been working for a long time as a journalist, but I don't know if he remembers or not, in one of the passages in the book, he says explicitly that he hates journalists. And because, journalists, according to him, in that passage that he narrates, are always, somehow waiting for a catastrophe that they should go and take some photos and, send the news. And Behrouz has himself experienced a lot of tragedies. The first time when I heard about this book, it was, early 2019, and it was because of the fact that it has been rewarded that, prestigeful, some sort of Nobel Prize for Literature in Australia. Then reading a Kurdish author from Iranian Kurdistan has been awarded that sort of, prize, just motivated me to find out what the book is about, and I was so fortunate that just after a couple of weeks I could find Behrouz and talk to Behrouz, and when I knew about the very generic features of the book, because I have been working on the novel narrative discourse for years, about 25 years, and as you mentioned, I wrote my PhD at Uppsala University, it was published in 2003, which is explicitly talks about the narration, how through the narration you construct identities, subjectivity of the people in different contexts. Now, having Behrouz and hearing about him, that he has narrated his own story, and I myself, with my background as a refugee from the more or less the same area that Behrouz is coming from, I found it as a golden opportunity to find how Behrouz has narrated himself, and through himself, the story of a generation, people like me and many others. Then, as soon as I started reading the book, I found it, especially the way that the book has been written, it's very extraordinary. It is not somebody who sits, in his or her own room, and starts writing his memories or her experiences. In book, you find something very unique that can be just seen from a very postmodern point of view. That somebody is in a prison, and that prison was supposed to be the place of his liberation. Behrouz had started traveling from Iran to Indonesia, and from there by boat to Australia once, twice, failing, and in 2 occasions about dying actually. And at the end he arrives there, and as you mentioned in the beginning, he arrived just 5 days after a decision by the Australian government that from now on whoever enters the territories of Australia illegally, especially by boat, he or she is not supposed to be awarded refugee rights. And then Behrouz, alongside many others, was sent to an island and later on to another island, Manus. And now, when I read the book, actually having been thinking about this intertextual relationship of all the narrations through the whole history, I was reminded, I don't know if you have just any loss to listen to this mythological aspect of narration in the whole history. And I wrote on my Facebook that Behrouz was very similar to a mythological author in the very early years of the Roman Empire. Augustinus, it's very short, I make it very short, in the 8 years before Common Era, actually had a very nice poet and author in his court. You have probably heard about him, Abydos or Ovidos. He sent him to exile and to an island that it's called Mythos. Now I was thinking about from Mythos to Manus, Mythos. And in Mythos actually Abydos died, tragically. But he created and he wrote 15 volumes of narrations, mythological ones, that has been survived through all these years. In one of those, which are called Metamorphoses, he reflects, Ovidus, reflects upon his own life. You have all heard about Daedalus or Daedalus, and it is actually one of the characters, one of the parts of these 15 volumes by Abydos, that he had been sent, it's a story now, by a king who was called Minos to an island because he was not so friendly towards the king. And Daedalus, if you have read, James Joyce, Ulysses, and fortunately in this country there are publications which is called Daedalus, and his relationship with Icarus. He is the creator of Labyrinth. But beside the Labyrinth, he is the creator of a story, Icarus, his son, and the way that they liberated themselves. It is exactly what happens to Behrouz. Now, 2,000 some hundred years ago, after that, somebody is in Manus, and in Manus, when you read the book, there are many tragedies which happen. People commit suicide, people try to eliminate themselves, setting themselves in fire in 50 grades, plus, and very hot weather, and more than that, as Behrouz mentioned, a kind of modern slavery, a kind of, controlling them. And in the book, you see magnificently all current modern theories that deal with how nowadays you control the people. Theories of Michel Foucault, theories of hierarchalism, panopticism, that if we have time, I can go to them, and saying how this way, this content, given a very postmodern approach or character to general features of the book, then I can simply say it's a novel, it's a memory, prison memory, it is journalistic, despite the fact he has said there that he doesn't like the journalist, and the traces of all these, both formatic one, stylistic one, and content-wise, of great works are going to be interest in this book. That I can explain that later.
Absolutely. Thank you. I want to go to you, Rahel, and ask you a question about significance of this book within the post-colonial literature context. One could argue that construction of nation-state and the bordering practices is the original sin of much of sufferings that we are having. That practices that cuts through linguistic, ethnological divides and creates differences, put peoples across borders that otherwise did not exist. Would you care to share your thoughts about that with us?
Yes. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. I'm very humbled to be in the presence of a amazing writer, Behrouz Boochani, even though it is through technology that we can have this discussion. So a lot of people, I remember before reading the book, I had read some reviews about it, and it talked about how it was prison literature, right? I also heard, understood that it was translated from Kurdish to English, that he had written it by text messages. But what I actually did read from the book was too limiting from what I found in the book itself. In fact, I think he doesn't even start talking about Manus as a prison until like 2/5 into the book, well into the book. He does speak of the story, the story of how he lived in Iran before and why he had left and all these things. But for me, this is not just a prison story. It's not just a Kurdish or Iranian story. It's a very true story that can be seen again and replicated, or if we did give voice to refugees and those displaced people, that they would be able to say the same things. Even the characters in the book were very. I could think of people that I know or family friends that have gone through the same situation. He was also telling their story, right? The story that he talks in the book is not just reflective of what Australian immigration policy is of and how they make sure people do not get onto the mainland of Australia through colonial practices, colonial surveillance and securitization of bodies. The same thing happens all over the world. And so as a post-colonial subject, I could easily reflect on it and say that this is true. This is not a novel, in fact. This is all the characters, if it was a Kurdish character in his book, I know that they're also, Sudanese people just like that, Somali people, Eritrean people that went through those exact same experience, maybe not through the Pacific Ocean or between Indonesia and Australia, but through the Mediterranean Sea. We talk about, it's easy to look at the Australian government's policies and forget that those policies exist in Europe as well. Just across the Öresund's bridge, we have the Shensmark detention center, where they purposely put people right next to a military camp, people traumatized by war, right? So that they have to wake up to the shots of guns every morning. So it's a universal memoir, and I think it should be mandatory literature, especially at the university level for students of not just literature, but human rights, international relations, migration studies, and I will, of course, recommend it to everybody I know.
Thank you very much. In fact, I forgot to mention Behrouz also holds 3 honorary associate professorships, 2 in Australia and University of Melbourne, New South Wales, and just recently, a couple of days ago, at Birkbeck Law School by the work of a race law group in Birkbeck Law School. Behrouz, I want to come back to you and ask you about specific ways in which Australian government manages the population in the prison. You often talk about it that they use hate as a mechanism of controlling the prison, especially in relation between the Manusian people and travelers who are now in prison. Would you care to talk about it or explain to us how did the Australian government describe the migrants who are in prison to the Manusians and the Manusian people to you guys?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, it is a challenge. So just imagine a person that they exile him to a remote island and keep him in a remote prison. And it was supposed to destroy him and his fellow. But after 6 years, we push them back, Just imagine 2 islands, a very tiny island and a very big, in the middle of a big ocean, actually the biggest ocean, and a big island which is Australia, So just imagine that they exiled us.
Behrouz, we lost your voice.
Here we push them back, we push them back and we challenge this system. So that's why, right now, by this kind of achievement, I think it's important. It is a challenge, and I think people need to some struggle to understand this challenge. So I think which is very important. And actually I couldn't understand your question very well, but I think I understand part of it. So and also I would like to mention that right now I am in Port Moresby, which is the capital city of Papua New Guinea. So Manus prison camp doesn't exist anymore. They transferred all of the refugees 2 weeks ago. All of us right now, we are in Port Moresby. So, but also I would like to mention this, that this kind of wars and this resistance by me and other refugees in Manus Island, actually it is historical. At least for Australia, it is historical because we told a story that actually it is a forgotten story in Australia. People around the world imagine Australia as a liberal democracy, imagine Australia as a country with a long history of, caring about human rights and as a free country. But this book and other works actually told a story that was forgotten in history of this country, and it was not a part of the official history. So that's why I think it's important. For decades, Australia used to exile people to the remote islands, keep people in prison camp, and prison is a part of Australian culture. For decades, they have been doing this. But now, I think this was exposed this system, I think, which is important. So part of history was forgotten, but now we have materials about it. So about the prison system, just I would like to mention, I talk a lot in the book and other works about creating hate between the tennis and to divide people, even in a small community in a remote prison. They created hate between the refugees. Small thing like
if you can repeat yourself, you lost your
or
voice.
a razor or something like this, and they force people to stay in the line for hours to get a simple thing. So they created this kind of hate and divide our small community. So So what I have done in this book, and I use the term hierarchical system, which is in Farsi is system al-hakam. So this Manus Island, and we the system put people, create a situation that people are in competition, And the interesting thing is that the very similar structure with the Manus prison system that I compared, it is the universities. It's very interesting that the universities and the university culture is very similar with the prison system in, Manus. So, what I am saying is that Manus prison system is the version, the main version of this system, a system that's designed to take people identity, freedom, individuality, and humanity. So the main version of this system we can find it in Manus prison system. One of them is university. We can see in the education system. We can see in the hospitals. We can see everywhere. So I think for understanding the Western societies, I think it's important that we look at this prison system because they deliberately designed this system to destroy people and take their freedom and humanity. So that's why, I think it's important. And even, they created fear between the local people and the refugees. When they exiled us to Manus Island, they are uncivilized, they are wild. And on the other side, they told the local people that these people that we brought to this island and we keep them in prison, they are terrorists, they are criminal, and they are dangerous. And they created this fear, and they have used it for years and years, and they have controlled the local community and the refugees community. So I think it's very important that we try to understand the mentality of this system, which is we should understand it through colonialism, and it relates to the history of colonialism in Australia. They have so we cannot say that Manus prison system just suddenly came up. No, this prison system and this exile policy, we should understand it through the history of colonialism in Australia, what they have done to indigenous people in Australia, and now, after 100 years, they rebuilt it, they reproduced a similar system in Manus, and so it is the mentality of colonialism. They have used this island and this land for the political benefits, and they use this land, this beautiful place, as a place for exile. So that's why I think it's important that we understand the soul of this system and the soul of this mentality. Because if we understand it, we can understand the Western societies.
Thank you very much. just to fill in the point, we lost you for a second, but to fill in it from your book, the point was that he mentions it also in the book that before arriving to the island, the Australian government, when they are holding the people in Christmas Island, tell them that Manusian people, you need to be careful of them, they are uncivilized, wild, in fact cannibals, they eat people. And they create these very vivid images of fear for them, or savages basically. Whereas when they arrive, they have been telling people in Manus that these are terrorists, suicide bombers, that they are the most dangerous prisoners of Australia that we have to put here. So this was the dynamic that is also mentioned in the book. Thank you. I'm going to go to you, Hashem, and I have a lot of questions, so I packed them, and then you just choose what you want, because we're going to go over time as well, obviously, a little bit. This book is written in Farsi, but by a person of Kurdish heritage, and it has a significance for production of that identity. And while reading it, and while reading its beautiful introduction, which concerns about the process of writing, I was constantly thinking about this famous saying that some people, I know two languages, my mother tongue, but also but I speak my colonizer's language much better than my mother tongue. So this dynamic that creates a different layer of thickness, if you wish, or richness to the book, at the same time as practices of emerging identities, or its relationship to the, you were going to talk about some sort of a significance from postmodernist perspective. So if you talk about the significance of it as a matter of language, turning it back to Kurdish, and also its place in that sort of trajectory that you're pointing at.
Sure, thank you. I think the whole idea of language, and especially in the connection with Behrouz' book and the way that he produced it, is interesting. And I was referring to that it was not a usual, common habit to sit down, as Virginia Woolf says, that you have your own room and you start writing. He wrote them with WhatsApp. And it is not the way that WhatsApp or telephones were allowed at the Manus, island. It was not actually. And the internet connection was very bad. You see now it is in Baltimore, and here even it's not the best. And 6 years ago, the connection was very bad, internet connection. And telephone was rarely, was smuggled actually to the island. Then Behrouz does not write on the paper because he was afraid. First of all, there was not any paper and pen allowed in the whole island and the prison or the campus. And it's interesting, but despite the fact that the prisoners needed this sort of things, they allowed, it's a part of the whole story, cigarettes, a lot of smoking. They gave them cigarettes very easily, but not papers and pen. Then Behrouz tries, as a matter of fact, to survive. It is the very magic of narration, that you keep, the whole memory in a way alive, not for yourself, but for the other generations, for us who didn't know anything what was going on in that, island. Writing and sending through WhatsApp to a friend, and then that friend should gather them and write them down, combine them in long paragraphs. Behrouz sent some of them to me. Sometimes you had 20 pages combined of all these messages without any punctuation, without any, paragraph and things like that. And it makes the whole idea of writing very complicated because you do not have the opportunity to go through that, to edit it, to restructure it. You have already experienced, many of you, that when you write a very small message to your friend, to your family members, you have mistakes, because especially this idea of smartphones, sometimes very silly mistakes happen that you miss the whole idea. Now, what kind of language he uses? He uses Persian, because Behrouz is from Iran, and since the early 20th century, the education system, late 19th century, in Iran has been compulsory in Persian, despite the fact that Behrouz's mother tongue is not Persian. It's a long story, actually, but here I want to draw your attention to the very important and significant role of the languages for the way that we think. Wittgenstein, you have heard about him, a genius guy, he says that if we talk the other languages, we would have talked so differently. I mean, there is a clear relationship between the way that we think, the way that we represent ourselves culturally, and the language that we use. It doesn't matter that the languages differ us so past radically that we are not human beings anymore. They all languages, structure-wise, you know, as Saussure, the structuralists say, share this log. They are all the same, but the way that they are produced, the way that they are used, articulated, make us very different. Now, for me, with the same background as Behrouz, having studied all my, high school years and even university in Iran in Persian, I could understand, very well the themes and the ideas behind every expression that Behrouz had. And at the same time, Behrouz was trying to narrate a new identity, a marginalized identity, a peripherized identity, a denied identity, which was Kurdish. Where? In Iran. And now he has come to somewhere, he is denied himself as a human being. You are nothing. You are a criminal. You have invaded our country. With what? With the very small boat that he was about to drown twice. And it is something that is narrated for the local people. And now by local people try to imagine Papua New Guinea, a very small country by 6 million population with 800 languages. 800 languages. It says a lot. That country is very untouched, very much behind the modernization, modernity, and the way that it is linked to Australia, earlier to British colonialism, and now to the independence and post-colonial epoch of that country. And within that larger country having Manus, again with 40,000 people, Papoos, who like smoke. Behrouz describes it so nice. Papoo is the common name for those people, locally native people who live there. And they admire, they love, smoking. And this one was something that you could make a good friendship with any Papoo through offering him, mostly him, a cigarette. And they could do whatever. Now, in the book, we notice that these marginalized people, the Papoos, the black ones, the refugees, denied identities, in the case of Behrouz, double identity, lost, Kurdish, refugee, now being denied again, that they can communicate better than those who were policemen, the white Australians, who could never, ever think that they could understand these guys. Who are they? And now in the book, there are different ways of, resist the whole idea of prison, campus, through laughing, through dance. Let me tell you something, concerning, again, generic features of the book. Once a teacher, always a teacher. The next question for your essays is the relationship between fact and fiction in Behrouz book. This is what I usually tell my students. But don't worry, don't need to write any essay. But the fact is that Behrouz in somewhere without having expected it. It is beyond his expectation. He thought that he should go to liberation, to be liberated in the Western democracy, in Australia. But he is in prison. He has been treated as a criminal. And there he writes as a matter of resistance. Now, among those guys who are there, the fact are they in prison, asylum seekers, many of them from Iran, Kurds, they have built up their own little Kurdistan in Manus with a flag, Kurdish flag. It's very interesting. Behrouz says that there was no pen, no painting, but suddenly in a corner of that Manus campus, you have Kurdistan. And they have actually claimed, these Kurds there, just suffering from not having a land, a country, that here is our country. And all the mangoes that are here, the fruit of those mangoes belong to us, nobody else. And it is a mechanism for the prisoners to control them, seeding, hate among them. Now, these guys try to dance to laughter. And among them, there is a character that is fictionalized somehow, but it has its roots in the factual, is called Mesa. He dances so well. And when he dances, the Australian bodyguards or prisoners cannot understand, gosh, why are these people so happy? They are in prison, they do not have food. Let me tell you that it was impossible to take any kind of food from the, food area to the rooms. And it happened, Behrouz says that hours and hours, sweating, not having enough water, clean water, not having anything to eat. And these guys, Mason among them, just they dance and they play and they laugh. Only Papuans could understand them better, in comparison to the Australians, because it is the same human culture. Being happy, resist against the way that they try to deny it. With this, I can go back to whether it is a novel or a memory. It is not a memory in the sense that Behrouz writes everything as he wants himself. Because there are things that he wants to say, but he cannot. It is not a factual narration because he is not supposed. Because there are people who have their own actual identity, nobody is supposed to know about them. Then he must defamiliarize. He must make you in a way that you are reading a fiction, not a factual book. And by this, it is a novel, because it is fictionalized. And at the same time, it is not created like Robinson Crusoe. Okay? Yeah. Although Robinson Crusoe has its roots in the fact as well. But having said that, question of identity and language is very significant that when I was translating the book, I noticed that the whole idea, because it has a long story, how it was translated into English. A group, led by Dr. Amin, a friend of Behrouz, I found a big difference between even the temporal aspect of the narration in Persian and then in English. Yeah. And then when I was translating into Kurdish, I was just talking to Behrouz. Shall I narrate it in the past as something that has already happened, or as something that, as we see in the English one, in the present, tense, that I talk now, not I talked yesterday. And it, countered me, actually, caused me some problems that probably I can, later on, if it is needed, to talk about it.
Thank you very much. I want to go to you, Rahel, and ask you, in preparation for this day, and you were talking to me that you see a thick layer or significance of this book in terms of its environmental conversation, the role of nature in the whole story. This is a question that I would like to ask you about. If you feel comfortable, please take that question, or if you want to talk about something that you find more significant, you don't have time, definitely take that as well.
Yeah, it's not so much about nature and its role, but the connections that I saw even in terms comes to climate change, right? So the sort of dominant discourse around refugees is that you can only be a refugee if you can experience or could experience some type of direct violence, right? That's where you see the split between the refugee leaving the war zone and what some people like to categorize as economic refugees. Personally, I think economy is a very good reason to be a refugee because of poverty and the way the global economic system works. But unfortunately, when it comes to the dominant discourse around refugees, we exclude those type of people, right? So in order to seek asylum, you have to prove this sort of absolute danger. And so once you cross that border, right, towards what you hope is going to be your final destination, it is imagined by the elites of this world that you're safe, right? Your first country of entry should be your safe point, and that is used to then further securitize and the people's movements so they don't reach a certain final destination. Hypothetically, Papua New Guinea could be considered a safer place than Syria or Iran, or in the case of Myanmar for the Rohingya refugees. But what the dominant discourse wants to make us forget is that it's not about safety, it's about human security, right? And I think all people who have experienced war or post-colonial subjects can appreciate or realize that when it comes to the West, for the most part, they don't bomb themselves, right? And so this idea of, so physically they might be safe at Manos Island, which is completely not true. So they should resettle there. Totally missed the bigger point, and that's how the global system works. That the core and the periphery are separated by these ideas of security. The climate change thing, I mean, if even people do not want to, understand the incredible heat that the prisoners of Manos experience, the deprivation, the security forces, and the way that they are continuously dehumanizing those people, even that Manos, or the Papua New Guinea, is an island country that is experiencing the effects already of climate change. Right? We talk about refugees as war. We need to start preparing ourselves for climate change refugees as well. I like to bring up the issue of climate change because I think for some liberal crowds it's an easier conversation to digest rather than the war scenario or the revolution. But yeah, it is. I think it is all interconnected. There is a reason why the West, in this particular case Australia, want to purposely deprive racialized people, refugees, from basic human rights. They like to pretend that they're the masters of human rights, but they would openly deny people their human rights, and that is because, like our friend Behrouz Boochani said, this is based on a colonial system. We should always analyze this from a position of coloniality.
Thank you very much. Behrouz, I want to come to you and ask you two questions. You can answer both of them or one of them, or talk about something else. And after that, I want to open the panel to ask questions. The first question is about the role of nature in your work and for the prisoners. You passed through an ocean that tried to kill you off, and you managed to significant experience surviving, and then suddenly your relationship, when you're looking through the window of the airplane, changes to it. You feel a sense of triumph and joy. And also the use of those beautiful nature as a matter of survival, to go into it, get lost, but also straight on government, destroy it constantly, to make more. And the second question that I want to ask is the importance of victories and achievements that you and your friends had over there by resisting this prison system. And if you want to talk about the current situation and current struggles, what is most important currently for you all, please do talk about it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very important question. I think it's very important because, always people say that Behrouz is a leftist. However, they say he is a socialist. But I think I'm not left and I'm not right. I'm an indigenous person. And my perspective in all of my works is a perspective of an indigenous person, who feel land, who feels soul. I think that is very important. So first, I would like to say something, following what the Dr. Hashem says about identity. I think the whole system designed to take your identity. So I think this works, particularly this book, is a struggle to take the identity back to people. So that's why in the book you can see that the characters, because they count us as a number. So I take that number, I rename people, but in a poetic way. In fact, I made people beautiful by giving them a new identity or their identity back, their humanity. So in all of the, throughout this book and all of the words, you can see that, I talk about the minorities, because, this book is related to my background, it related to Kurdistan. Actually, I use the Kurdish and Kurdistan resistance, I use those terms and those concepts to write this book, and so I think it's very similar what is happening here in Manus Island and what is happening in Kurdistan and the history of Kurdistan. So I use those terms to tell this story. So that's why you can see the refugees, the local people, the Kurdish people, and also in other of my works about gay people. What is important, I think it's very important, I didn't say that before, is that even through the refugee community inside the prison camp, they divide, the community. For example, they are victims under this system, but in other side, they create, injustice to some of the refugees, like the gay people. It's very interesting. And they is looking at them, the system looking at them. I think that is very interesting part of this work and this system, is that even the detainees who are victims under this system, they make others as a victim. They are treating others in a way that Australia is treating them. They put so many comments, racist comments to the local people, with different colors and culture inside the prison, to the Muslim people, to other people. I think that is very interesting. So I didn't write about this yet, but definitely I think it's important that I write about this part of this system. But the whole this book, the whole these works are a struggle to if I say only one sentence, which is this, that the whole these works are fighting and struggling to identity, because the whole system designed to take people identity. So about the nature, I think nature, sometimes I imagine that if they would keep us in a very modern place, I mean with in a place with a modern building or something like that, and we couldn't see ocean and nature, we couldn't feel if they wouldn't even keep us in a tropical island, I think we wouldn't survive. So we survive because of the nature. We rely on the nature, and we, in some part of the book, in chapter 8, I think, even we became a part of the ecosystem. We were in competition. The detainees are in competition with the crabs, with the birds to get the mango fruit. I think that is very important, that even the detainees, the human, became a part of the ecosystem in some ways. And I think the most free part of this system was that time that the detainees rely on the nature. The detainees rely on the nature. So I think we survive only because of the nature. And now, I return to the main question that I raised. I think the first question, first answer, which is Manus prison system is the main version of the system that actually is running a country like Australia and the modern societies. So now we can see that for feeling freedom, I think people should return to nature, return to nature and rely on the nature. I love city, I love city a lot, but I think people, nature is a way to escape from a very complicated modern system, So that's why I think nature, that represents my perspective as a indigenous person. So I introduce myself as an indigenous person. But now, about the current situation, right now we are in Port Moresby. So I think some people say that the Manus prison system closed because of your book and your works. I say no. They closed this place and because of our resistance. All of the people who have been resisting in front of this system, they achieved this. So definitely a book or a movie cannot, we cannot say that change this system or...
Thank you very much, Behrouz.
Your book and but definitely all of the refugees, all of the people who have been resisting in front of this system in different ways. Some of them are like the Mason de Paul in the book, that he is playing, he's singing, he is funny, his performance. So, and some people just had a small garden in corner of the prison, and some people were doing exercise, some people were making fun with others. So everyone creates a way to resist in front of this system. But my way was quite different. So I survived through my writing and my art. But definitely this achievement, and 60% of people are already released from this country. That which I think about 300 people went to Africa, and more than 200 people went to Australia under a law called Medevac law for medical treatment. So we expect that in next 6 months everyone released from this place. But so any achievement that we had is because of everyone, not for an individual person. I'm only one of these. I'm only a member of this community. It is our resistance.
Thank you, Behrouz. I want to just, we are eating a lot of time from other people. I want to go to the audience and ask you to ask questions if you have. Please keep your questions in form of a question and short. We are running a little bit over time, more than a little bit. And thank you. Anybody have a question? One over there. I promise that we will be over by 1/2 so.
Thank you for this talk. My question is directed to Behrouz. In your book, you talked about the kyriarchy, and I was wondering if you could explain that a bit more, how you came across the concept and why you decided to use the concept of the kyriarchy as a way to illuminate your circumstances.
Did you hear the question, Behrouz?
Yeah, I hear. So, curriculum system, actually it is the main, for years and years, I have been struggling to create a different language. A language to represent our situation, a language to challenge this system. So, curriculum system, actually, the main concept is in Farsi is system Hashem, which I created just by myself. I didn't use it. I didn't use this word. I didn't take this word from others. Just it is a system Hashem that I use this. But Omid, when Omid wanted to translate this word, so he suggested to use the curriculum system, and he said that he is going to use this, and because he thought that only this concept can be, to translate this word, this system Hashem. So he used that term, but he was not sure. But fortunately, I think it was good. So it was a good decision that he used that word. So curriculum system actually, it is a system that in the first answer I explained that actually this helped us that we understand this system beyond manuscriptism. So it's the, when we use this system, we can talk about Australia and about the modern Western societies. And so I explained that university structure are very similar. So universities are, I think all of you have done experience.
Thank you very much. It seems that this was the last question and we are overtly over time. Thank you very much, Behrouz, for joining us. I wish you the best. Thank you, Rahel. Thank you, Hashem. We'll be around for more conversation. Round of applause, I guess.